Welcome to the official Colorado Sports Hall of Fame podcast. I'm Dave Plati.
And I'm Jim Saccomano, and we are your co-hosts. Between us, we have 88 years of experience working in media relations in Colorado sports. Myself with the Broncos, Dave with CU. And back in the day, both of us with the Denver Bears with several side experiences as well.
Now, this week, we begin our reveal of 150 significant moments, including ranking the top 50 in state of Colorado sports history as we head into the state's 150th birthday this August 1st. That's the date Colorado was admitted to the Union as the 38th state in 1876. A select committee of state veterans, 10 of us in all, with about 275 years involved in the state of Colorado sports, are selecting these moments that we will count down at a rate of 5 per week and then daily for the top 10 come the end of July.
This is our 10th podcast. We hope you're enjoying them. We've bounced around a bit in leading up to our countdown, and all are archived on the Colorado Sports Hall of Fame website. That's coloradosports.org. Click on the menu bar and then podcasts.
We have been revisiting other moments in Colorado sports history in or around the date that we publish our podcast, those that aren't in the top 150. I have isolated over 1,930 of these moments, all chronologically by date that signifies the importance at the time. Guess what was added just yesterday? A certain football team is now the number 1 seed in the AFC. So as things happen, I add them to the list. As the late great Dan Creedon, sports editor of the Boulder Camera, once told one of his reporters, history did not begin when you decided to start paying attention to it. That's why when going back, looking over the history back to the first thing I found in 1862, which is when 8 businessmen in Denver got together to form a professional baseball league, those are the moments that were significant at the time that they happened. For example, January 5th, 1985. Mark Langkamp made 2 free throws with 6 seconds remaining in the game to lift the University of Denver to a 59-57 win over visiting Metro State, the Pioneers' 79th straight home win dating back to February 1980. The streak came to an end 3 days later when Northern Colorado won 67-64. UNC actually had been the first victim in the nearly 5-year-long winning streak. Floyd Thaird's DU squads made NCAA tournament appearances those 4 years, leading the team, which in the time he posted a 93-26 1-loss record as Denver was an independent.
Now on January 5th, 1974, and again in 1978, the Denver Broncos had the respective head coaches named Coach of the Year, John Ralston for the 73 season and Red Miller for the 1977 campaign. Ralston led the Broncos to a 7-5-2 record, their first winning season in their 14th year of existence, and battling for the AFC West Division title until the last game of the season. And of course, in 77, Miller coached Denver to a 12-2 record and its first division title, followed by 2 playoff wins and the franchise's first of 8 appearances in the Super Bowl.
All right. Well, we have enlisted a local celebrity to help us start our countdowns. So are you ready to start the count, Jim?
Sure am, Dave.
Let's start the countdown. We begin with one of the greatest moments in Colorado sports history, number 150.
On April 11th, 1885, in the first intercollegiate football game played west of the Mississippi River, Colorado College defeated the University of Denver Ministers at the time 12-0. Newspaper accounts early on never listed any stats, if they were even kept, or even most of the scoring plays. Usually they would talk about who was in the game, when they got in, and which offensive or defensive line was the stoutest. The stories back then were quite different than what you would read today. Now, both institutions actually had been around for a while, DU since 1864 and CC since 1874. The first intercollegiate football game, everybody knows, was played in 1869 when Rutgers beat Princeton 6-4. The game methodically spread west.
You know, Dave, I'm not sure if everybody knew that, but they know it now.
One of the greatest moments in Colorado sports history. Number 149.
On April 12th, 1965, Bob Martin hosted the first sports talk show in the state and possibly the nation when, on this April Friday, he hosted Sportsline and interviewed Bronco head coach Max Speedy and took calls from the public. It aired for 1 hour from 6 to 7 p.m. on KTLN Radio, 1260, 1280 a.m. Speedy was named interim head coach the previous October when Jack Faulkner was fired, with the interim tag removed with an announcement on December 12th.
One of the greatest moments in Colorado sports history. Number 148.
Let's see who remembers this one. On August 26, 1974, the first championship by any Denver professional team other than minor league baseball was claimed by the Denver Rackets. They won the inaugural World Team Tennis League title. The Rackets defeated the top-seeded Philadelphia Freedoms 2-1 in the best-of-3 finals. Denver had won the Pacific section with a 30-14 record and defeated the San Francisco Golden Gators and the Minnesota Buckskins to get to the finals. The teams were composed of half men and half women. Philadelphia was led, of course, by Billie Jean King. I think everybody remembers Elton John's song, Philadelphia Freedoms. That was to promote that tennis team. The league MVP, Australian Tony Roach, was the Denver player coach, and the team also had the playoffs MVP in Andrew Pattison.
One of the greatest moments in Colorado sports history. Number 147.
Well, this was on September 13th, 2000. In high school boys tennis, Wheatridge defeated Cherry Creek 5-2, ending the Bruins' remarkable dual match winning streak at 316, the longest in the nation. In 1991, it was Wheatridge that ended Cherry Creek's run of 19 straight national record state championships. The streak, which began in 1972, Richard Nixon's first term as president, was and remains the second longest of any sport in the country, behind only the Brandon, Florida wrestling team that won 459 consecutive dual meets from 1973 into 2008.
35 years, that's crazy.
It is.
One of the greatest moments in Colorado sports history. Number 146.
Now, I was home in New York my sophomore year in college, but I wonder if Jim went to this event. On July 14th, 1979, it was only an exhibition as former heavyweight boxing champion Muhammad Ali fought an 8-round match against Denver Bronco defensive lineman Lyle Alzado. Around 20,000 fans attended the event at Mile High Stadium, which wasn't officially scored but went all 8 rounds. Most, if not all, thought Ali won easily. About 600 miles east on that same night, Jamie Easterly of the Denver Bears pitched a perfect game in the Bears' 10-0 win over the Iowa Oaks in Des Moines. That was the last of 7 no-hitters in Denver's minor league baseball history and spanned over 100 years. Jim, were you there?
No, I was not, but it was bizarre to take advantage of just in terms of talking to people around it and everything. And Lyle Alzado, poor Lyle, he was the nicest guy, heart of gold. But one time we're having practice, this is the following year, and he calls me over and he says, Jim, do you think I should quit football and become a pro boxer? I said, Lyle, I don't know, but he was taken by the fact that he fought Ali, and even though Ali probably carried him in the match.
Who were the fans rooting for Lyle or for Muhammad?
They were rooting for Lyle.
That I don't know if anything similar has happened to this day. So, at any rate, now we're going to revisit our number 149 moment, the first known sports talk on radio in the state. Our special guest today is Joe Williams, one of the early 1980s pioneers in sports talk in the state of Colorado. Of course, KOA's, the late Bob Martin, was the first to have a call-in show, possibly the first of its kind in the nation. A lot of people credit WFAN in New York in the mid-'80s, but that's nowhere true. KLZ was actually the first to offer KOA competition, pairing Woody Page with Don Cole in 1974. That was short-lived as Cole was let go by the station the next year, but Woody remained doing commentaries and interviews. In 1978, KWBZ, can't remember where they were on the dial, hired Woody, who did a solo talk show for several months before being paired with Mike Wolf. His partners would change, first joined by former Denver Bronco Mike Hafner and then Irv Brown, who had just retired as CU's baseball coach. But the talk show explosion in Denver was coming.
Throughout the 1980s and into the 1990s, mainstayers like Irv and Woody led the way, soon to be joined by Joe. A literal cavalcade of names in Denver sports, media, coaches, and athletes soon occupied the airwaves on as many as 5 stations offering sports talk, often with multiple shows. The roster was impressive. How many will remember behind the mics were Sandy Clough, Dave Logan, Jim Turner, Buddy Martin, Drew Goodman, Scott Hastings, Steve Harms, Gil Whiteley, Theory Smith, Tom Green, Doug Moe, Dan Issel, Jim Armstrong, and Les Shapiro. I think Dave and I can attest to the explosion of shows, as often before or after practice, we'd have as many as 5 to 7 requests to provide them guests.
Oh, I remember those days, especially when the Buffs got good in football. Those requests were endless.
They were.
But the true constants were Irv Brown and Joe Williams, who spent 37 years partnering until a year before Irv passed away in 2019. But Joe, you weren't in the media. We're going to welcome our guest right now, Joe Williams, and we want to find out first and foremost, Joe, how did you become involved and eventually become a sports talk show icon?
Well, fellas, thanks for having me on. I appreciate it. I remember when I first hooked up with Irv and Woody, and CU football wasn't very good those days, the Chuck Fairbanks days. And Dave, that's just about when I met you, I think. But how I joined Irv and Woody, it was, it wouldn't really happen in today. It would be impossible the way it worked because they used to broker their time with radio stations and they ran their own business, and they didn't necessarily, you didn't have to have a resume in order to get into radio. And I certainly didn't have one. I'd followed sports all my life, but I had not gone to broadcasting school, which I think over the years became fairly evident to everyone that what the case was. But I worked for a new home builder, and I had a lot of downtime during the week. Our busy days were Saturdays and Sundays. And so during the day, afternoons, whatever, I would listen, obviously to the radio, being a big sports fan. And I found out about Irv and Woody, and I liked the way they did their show. It kind of appealed to me. It wasn't kind of the same kind of thing. Every once in a while, questions would be asked that may be different from what was reported in the newspaper. I don't know. It just kind of, I got interested in that way, and I started calling in. And normally, just maybe if I didn't like something I heard or I disagreed with, like most callers, I would call in and, we'd have it out, whatever. Irv at one time invited me to come down to a remote. I can't remember exactly where it was. I think it was down on, oh boy, I tell you, I can't remember. But I remember the NCAA tournament was going on. And so I met them. And a week or two later, Irv called me and asked me if I would consider coming to work for them to help them sell their radio show. And of course, I had never thought about doing anything like that, and did not suspect I'd be put on the air or anything. Irv just said, "Come down, we'll have a good time." I says, "How much money can I make, and how long will I have to starve?" And because I was doing okay in the home building business at that time, and we worked out a deal, and that's how I got started with them. And then eventually, they would go on vacation or they would go on cruises and stuff, and they would ask me to fill in, which I tried to do. I wasn't certainly was not trained in the business, and I felt like I didn't have much of a future in that end of it. But I did my best, and as things went along and as the business changed, the corporations came in, took over the radio stations where Irv and Woody had worked out their deals. And eventually, instead of working for Irv and Woody, just like those two, I began working for the radio station themselves and gained more airtime. And more or less, that's kind of the way it worked.
Joe, was there a specific reason you first called into the show? Do you remember the subject you called about?
No, I don't. I just remember mostly it was about football, and I liked the way that they handled the show. I liked the way Woody wrote in the papers, and I was interested in their opinions, which did not always line up, with the what you might hear somewhere else. And but I don't remember the first time I called in or what the reason was for calling in.
But eventually, along the way, you earned the nickname or the moniker, the Hitman.
Oh yeah,
So
I remember that. Yeah.
There must have been some particular teams or athletes you enjoyed picking on.
Oh, I wanted to mention something too, because talking with Tim, y'all were talking about Alzado and Ali. I went to that fight, and that, of course, was before I was in the media. But I remember that was really something. And Ali, he was having a heck of a time, and I remember Alzado hauled off and hit him one time, and then Ali, I think, kind of got serious, and and from then on, I think basically they just kind of wanted Lyle to survive and finish up the fight, and that was quite interesting. And you're right, the fans were for Alzado, that's for sure.
That kind of aligns with the first scene in Rocky, where after the first round, the trainer says to Apollo Creed, he doesn't think this is a show. He thinks it's a damn fight.
Right, exactly. Yeah, you asked me about the Hitman part. I was down in Albuquerque, and I think I spent a little time with Mr. Simmons down there. I can't remember for sure, but for the Final Four in '83, and I was down there for that, and I came back on Sunday because I had to do the show because Irv and Woody were gone on Monday. I came back and promptly announced to the audience that I had just seen the second coming of how college basketball was going to be played. It was played above the rim, and that North Carolina State, who I had already seen play, did not play above the rim, and told everybody they had absolutely no chance against Houston. Some guy called in. The guy's name was Jake the Snake, and he used the name Baron von Hitman. That's the first time I'd ever heard Hitman.
How about that?
That I remember.
What was it like working with Irv all those years? He was connected all around the nation, most notably with Bobby Knight from his days as a basketball referee. Who were some of the guests you enjoyed having on the most?
Well, we had great producers, and Irv, of course, and Woody earlier, but Woody left us about 1984. And after that, I think the most fun we had, of course, was talking to different coaches and players. Irv had a lot of contacts in college basketball, as you can imagine, and they all respected him. But I can tell you that they could recall every single instance in which they felt like Irv gave them a bad deal. And they didn't mind talking about it on the air. And I could go on and on. I could fill up hours telling you stories about guys like Bob Knight and Don Haskins and Jerry Tarkanian and Digger Phelps. And stories, and y'all probably have heard them all on the air more than once. But I think that was
Al McGuire.
Al McGuire, who led Irv off the hook when Irv cost him a national championship, and was very gracious. And who else?
It was 1974.
Yeah, 74. That's right. And guys like that, the coaches, and I can tell you a million stories. Haskins was great. He was funnier than heck. He used to call us he'd call us on the air. He'd be in town playing up here in Fort Collins, and he'd call in the afternoon, and he'd give us a story or two. And next thing you know, you could tell he was starting to get worked up. And about 5 minutes later, I could just see him with that red face and pulling off that clip-on tie that he always wore, and giving Irv the business. And then, of course, the show would go off, and Irv would go home, and about 9:30, Haskins will have been, chipping the light fantastic. And by then he was really mad. And he'd get Irv out of bed and start reaming him. Just things like that. The great stories like that, and there's a million of them. And I think I enjoyed those things more than anything else. And of course, we were all there when Colorado football was down, and then it was resurrected when Bill Moreau had the good sense to extend Bill McCartney after a rough couple of years. And then we all know what happened after that. And we all had a lot of fun watching that.
And of course, when your producers couldn't get anybody important, that's when you had people like me and Sacco on.
We had you guys on all the time. I don't know what we'd have done without you.
So, well, speaking of college football, you were obviously a big fan of the sport. How did your love for the sport begin? Were you a young kid going to football games?
Yeah. I was raised in Texas, and I first started listening to football games on the radio. And I was raised in West Texas, and I was a University of Texas fan as a kid. All my folks and relatives were Oklahoma Sooner fans, and somehow I got involved at that age, believe it or not, of reading everything I could about college football that I could get my hands on, and trying to find out. There wasn't a whole in Plainview, Texas, and in Fort Worth, Texas, where I got a little more access to the media in Fort Worth, and that's kind of how I got started with that, and really started a lifelong love affair with sports and college football and college basketball in general.
You're probably like a lot of us. You can't be happy right now with how literally the game's changed overnight in the last few years with the NIL money and everything that's going on with the transfer portal.
It is different, and right now it's kind of like a three-ring circus, and there doesn't seem to be a ringmaster.
Yeah, that's a good point.
You don't know where it's going. I guess the portal now it lasts for like 2 weeks, and you have to stay for 1 year, but you can't keep up with the comings and goings of these players. Just using the University of Colorado as an example. I mean, those players come and go every year, and they don't have a chance to develop anybody, and it just seems so disjointed to me. And it's a different scene, and I wouldn't imagine it's as much fun covering it as it was when we were covering it back when things were more or less normal. When they were getting paid out of the drugstore, we could all keep up with that. But this transfer portal and everything has kind of left me.
That's for sure.
Yeah.
I think what I'd miss the most about it is when a player was there 4 or 5 years, you really developed a really good relationship with the player, and eventually a lifelong friendship. I mean, obviously you're not friends going out to dinner or drinks with players when they're in college, but years later you meet players like for example, I used to go out all the time with Rashawn Salam before he passed away, or still see Matt Russell on occasion, Jeff Campbell, guys like that those develop into friendships. Now these kids are there for a year and they're gone. Those are going to be days of the past.
Yeah, well, I know that all the players had a great respect for Dave Plati and Jim Saccomano, and I think that some of them like Todd, and I don't think any of them like me, but we got by.
Joe,
Bill McCartney loved going on with you, Joe. That's don't undersell yourself.
No, I know he did, and we believed in him, and I believed in him, and I thought it was when they hired him, and he did not shy away from the Nebraska. As we all know, when they hired Bill, CU had not beaten Nebraska, Dave, I think since 1967 was the last time that they beat them over in Lincoln. And that had been like 14 or 15 years. And we all know what happened in between. It seemed like every year they kind of got throttled. And when McCartney came in, the first thing he did was he circled that day in red, as we all remember he did. And he was serious about it. And he pulled it off. He was able to do it. And that was, I think, probably the most fun watching the CU's resurgence in football. Probably the most fun that we could have had. And they had the good sense to hire him and keep him going, keep him propped up. And things went on from there. And when he left, I was sorry to see him go. I think a lot of people were. I was very sorry to see him go. But that was his decision that he made for him and his family. And after that, there was still success, with Rick, and then also with Gary Barnett. And they made a mistake when they fired Gary Barnett, I thought, and they really have never recovered from that since, in terms of what they were as a football program. But that's just an opinion of mine. You probably don't want to hear about that anyway. So,
I think I recall you and Dave Logan quite often leaving the press box to go stand out on the platform because you were scared I was going to throw you out for cheering.
You did once. You don't remember, but you did once. And it was the 84. It was 1984 when Jeff Campbell returned that punt. I think it was him returned that punt. And Dave and I got up and started yelling, and you told us just to keep right on going right out that door on the end of the press box. And we spent the rest of the game out there enjoying ourselves. It was 84, wasn't it? I don't have my notes in front of me, but I think it was 84. Yeah.
86.
Was it 86 when they beat them? Okay, that's right.
Yeah.
That's right. 84 was Mark Hatcher. Yeah.
84 is the year where we actually led 7-3.
Yeah.
After 3 quarters. And I went down to the office to find out when's the last time we even led after 3 periods. And by the time I got back up to the press box, we were behind 17-7.
That's right. It was 86, not 84. Yeah.
Right.
Joe, did anyone that you were critical of on the air ever confront you?
Not really. We tried to, Irv and I talked about this, and we tried to always run a results-oriented radio program. Some people, take exception to that, some players and some coaches, and I'm sure that there are a lot of them that did not appreciate the way we approached our business. I wasn't necessarily worried about being fair, but I didn't have it in for anybody either. And we just tried to talk about it. And we had 4 hours a day to fill up time. And that's plenty of time to get on people's nerves and get under their skin, which I'm sure we did. And it was on purpose, yeah. But I would like to think that I could go up to anybody who was one of our subjects, and God, we covered everybody. And we had arguments with everybody. I mean, I had arguments with Doug Moe, for crying out loud.
Yeah, it's hard to get him.
Yeah, and I mean, who couldn't love Doug Moe? I mean, it was, but it seemed like we always seemed to get along afterwards, and they had a pretty good idea of what we were doing. And I would like to think almost all of them, with a couple of exceptions, I could sit down and have a drink with today.
I think there was a lot of shtick involved, Joe, and people had to accept that. I know that's what I told Mike Shanahan a lot of times is, look, this is Joe's shtick. You can't worry about it. He goes back and forth, and if you win and you're great. If you lose, it's tough, but it's a shtick.
Well, we at least I operated under the theory, rightly or wrongly, that if we all agreed, then we wouldn't have much of a show. We were trying to entertain people, so that meant that somebody was going to have to go to the guillotine every day. And but a lot of it was tongue in cheek. I don't know if it came off that way, but I mean, I had people like, like guys like Harry Simmons, who was one of the best basketball coaches this state's ever seen. You know, I got a chance to meet people like him. He knew exactly what we were doing, and he en- he enjoyed it. We could get away with it. I think most people thought that, you know, if they spend any time at all, because most people don't listen for 4 hours. They're
Mhm.
listening when they're in their car. And our job, we were always told, was to try to keep people listening as long as we could, because the average listener was about 20 minutes. And time spent listening in a radio operation, time spent listening is crucial. That's what they base their figures on, where they go out and sell money so they can pay us money that we don't deserve, but that we all enjoy having. And time spent listening was a big deal. And so you try to grab somebody and hope maybe when they got home in their driveway, they waited an extra few minutes so they could find out what we were going to say next, or what was going to be said next, before they got out of their car and went into their families and enjoyed their dinner.
Mhm.
Well, we're nearing the end of our time here, Joe, but real quickly, what was the thing you loved the most about your career in radio?
That's very easy, as all the people that I met. A lot of those people that you mentioned earlier, including you guys, and people like Dave Logan, who I'm still very good friends with today, and people like Buddy Martin, Terry Fry. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. Tim Simmons, who remains a good friend of mine, and just the people, the relationships that you form, and they last a long time. And just talking to you guys, we all went through this years and years and years of this, and I was always happy to see you guys. You guys helped us out so much, and had a lot to do with our programming and how things went over, and mostly the people. That's what I like the most about it, and that I've been able to keep almost all these
Mhm.
people as friends, although I don't see them very much more.
Joe, you did a lot of remotes during your career. Was there a favorite place?
Yes,
Were you ever hassled, and did everyone ever ask you for an autograph?
My favorite place to do a remote. We did 2 remotes at Tim Simmons' house in Boulder. We call them the Drake Wakes. This is when C was having trouble with.
I remember.
Do you remember those?
Yes, I do.
Yeah, everybody still remembers those shows, and I'm sure Tim's wife also remembers them. Because everybody that we drug in there would seem to show up. But those were different. Mostly, as you guys know, we did them in bars. We did them, and I think we must have hit just about every bar in Denver over the 30 some odd years that Irvin and I did shows together. And I'd have a hard time picking out one that was a favorite, because we did so many for so many years, and at the same place. And the one thing that I'm proud of is I never drank in any of those bars that I worked in.
Well, Joe, we really want to thank you for coming on and sharing your thoughts with us on our podcast today. Hope you enjoyed it as well.
Been a lot of fun, guys. It's an honor to be with you.
Thank you,
Great.
Joe.
Good. Well, everybody, keep spreading the word. We want to thank our sponsors, Pasta Jays of Boulders and Tim Simmons's Colorado Collegiate Chronicle, an in-depth look at college sports around the state. And I want to thank our version of the late, great Don Pardo, Mark Johnson, for introducing each moment's number.
And as always, we look forward to you tuning in weekly to enjoy our reminiscing with our Colorado Sports Hall of Fame guests, as well as our trips back into the state's sports history. A reminder that the Colorado Sports Hall of Fame class of 2026 will be inducted this coming April 16th at the Hilton City Center in downtown Denver, and that hall offers tours of its museum as well as Empower Field at Mile High Stadium.